Awesome. So I'd love to start, if you all could just introduce yourselves a little in more depth than I did, besides just name and serial number and rank and whatnot. So Kay, why don't we start with you?
Sure. Hi, I'm Kay Redden. I run Den Tapes. It's a short-run cassette label in Seattle, and I've been doing it for 9 years. And I also work at Sonic Boom in Ballard, which you've probably seen me at, and at the Sunset, also booking as well.
Great, thank you. Chris.
I'm Chris Jacobs. I'm Subpop's Senior Vice President. I was trying to make that seem funnier than it was. And I've been there for 27 years and done a whole bunch of different jobs.
I'm Tomo Nakayama. I'm a singer and a songwriter, producer, and I grew up in Seattle. I've been playing in bands since I was like 20, and so I've been musician for half my life, pretty much.
Well, you can applaud for that. So Tomo, maybe let's start with you, because you are the recording artist that's on the stage, and you've done a lot of things over the year, played in different bands as a solo artist, things like that. And as somebody that seems like they make most of their living as a musician, could you maybe just tell us a little bit about all the different things that add up to that? I mean, you play live concerts, you record music for movies and television. Like, what does sort of a year look like in terms of different places that you're making money from?
It's like any sort of like freelance business, you know. It's just constant hustling, and I'd say a majority of my income comes from live performances, festivals, shows at clubs, and I also busk at SeaTac Airport. I'll play weddings and corporate events and things like that, and then once in a while I'll have an opportunity to do like licensing projects or composing for TV, movies, and things like that. But I'm always looking for interesting people to collaborate with. Yeah.
And just to clarify for everybody, because I think probably everybody's in different places in what they're trying to do musically, I assume that a lot of those things kind of ping-ponged off each other, that one opportunity, maybe you meet somebody that then reaches out for something else, or somebody that you can ask about. I mean, it wasn't like you started doing all that stuff simultaneously.
No, it's just been a slow, like I said, I've been playing, half my life pretty much. And it's just about kind of like maintaining relationships and finding people whose work you resonate with, and then just like supporting their work and just supporting each other's work and kind of building your own community, as opposed to like trying to sell yourself to like an existing whatever the popular thing is. It's that's a lot harder to try to like hop on something that's already blown up, as opposed to like building something yourself, so.
Totally. Did you ever find it was hard to trust yourself, trying to chase what was unique to you rather than trying to fit in with what was going on around you?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's always like growth when you're an artist, and it takes a while to kind of find your own voice, but I think I was always kind of limited by my own abilities as well, and I think that's a good thing. You got to kind of accept your own strengths and your own weaknesses and interests, and kind of be okay with the fact that you're never gonna sound exactly like the thing that you're inspired by. I would say if you do sound exactly like the thing you're inspired by, then you're doing it wrong, like like the most interesting part of art is how we aim and miss, so does that answer your question?
That totally does. So Kay, tell us a little bit about Den Tapes. I mean, you guys, you work with a lot of artists at different levels, but it seems like more on the emerging side. And how do you decide who you want to work with the label?
Oh boy.
Or how do you decide who you don't want to work with?
I mean, I feel like in the beginning years, it was a lot of like homies that I had already known, that I was just like, oh, I just want to help you put out a tape, have a physical product. That's like kind of where it all started, was just like, oh, everybody just like needs something to sell. And if you don't have a T-shirt, someone's bound to buy a tape or a sticker or whatever. They were cheap to make at the beginning. They still are, relatively, especially like against vinyl and stuff. But yeah, mostly it was homies, and then meeting homies of those homies, and yeah, just the community just gets bigger and bigger.
What sort of runs do you usually do when you're making tapes for artists?
Oh man, usually right now it's between 50 and 100, and then it's very easy to just get like another 50 or 100 if those sell out. But it feels really nice to be like, we sold out. Do you want to get more? Like that. I mean, even if it's 100 tapes, that's kind of nuts, especially if it's like a band in Seattle that doesn't tour, or like, you know, a very like early band. But like that's gotta feel really good that like 100 people were like, I'll buy your tape.
Well, and that's 100 people that they have that thing in their home or their car, and not just a link to a streaming site or something.
Yeah.
If 100 is a success, which it definitely is, like, have you had to reprint titles over and like, what would you say maybe is like, have you had super success? Or do you prefer to keep it limited edition where?
I do like to keep things limited. I feel like the thing I like to keep limited more often is like T-shirts, just so we can get like more artists doing runs of T-shirts, and then you just get like, you only get this T-shirt once, you know, and if you missed it, you missed it. But I feel like as we've grown, there are a lot of tapes that we haven't repressed, but as we've grown, I feel better about doing more presses of things. We just got 100 more Coral Grief tapes today, so so that's a success.
That sweatshirt that you have,
Oh.
that is very popular.
Yes, I actually did 2 runs of that sweatshirt. If you guys haven't seen them, it says "Don't move here, it rains all the time" on the back. Happy times, sad times lyric.
I was at a show recently, and there were 2 guys standing in front of me, both wearing that sweatshirt.
I love to see it. But that was when we did another run, and I was like, okay, we can't keep doing this. I want it to be really cool and like not, you know, keep it like a little secret.
So hopefully you won't see it knocked off on the internet.
Oh my God. I looked that up before I made those, and I saw like little Redbubble tees that I was like, no.
Redbubble, no!
No.
What I find is interesting is that what Kay's doing with Den Tapes, and then what Chris and his work with Subpop, or Subpop in general, I mean, there's 30 years in between those, or the 27 years between the formation of one or the other. But I mean, Subpop didn't start much different, and granted, you weren't there at the very beginning, but then what Kay's doing about just trying to document and support music that the founders loved. Maybe talk a little bit about, I mean, what you're doing now with the label, but I just want to create that connection that you're still working, trying to find music that you absolutely love and trying to share it with the world.
That.
Okay. All right. I should have written it down
I'm
for
sorry.
you. Okay.
I don't mean to be glib about that. Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think we do have fundamentally a lot in common with what Kay is doing, which is just trying to find, you know, music that you respond to or care a lot about or think is different, or doing something that's important in some way, however you define that. And then also people that you get along with and kind of share expectations with, and can kind of, you know, it's sort of a big relationship, you know? And so making sure that you, that's based upon sort of shared understandings of what you're going to provide and where you're going and what you're capable of doing on their behalf.
I mean, in some ways, with what Kate identified with Den Tapes, that if they can sell 100 tapes, that's a success. So your return on your investment, if you don't sell the 100 tapes, it's a bummer, but it's not like you've leveraged spending hundreds of thousands of dollars trying to do that. So when you folks these days are signing artists, Chris, I mean, I'm sure this people ask all the time, well, how do you decide what artists you sign and things like that? But there has to be a level of commerce thinking, because you're a record label, you're trying to sell music. So what sort of different criteria are you thinking about when you're evaluating somebody you might work with these days?
It's kind of different, I think, in every case for artists that we work with. Fundamentally, it's still got to be something that you just love. Like, that's got to be the starting point, is it's got to be something that you really respond to in a kind of like immediate and kind of meaningful way. And then there are lots of different kind of indicators that can, if they have previous records that they've done, if they put out a tape on Den Tapes or what, like there can be any number of things, if they have, you know, social media, if they feel like they're people who are like you are, taking a lot of control of their, or agency in their own kind of career or aspirations or whatever, that's usually a really good indicator that they're not like the kinds of people who are like, I'm an amazing songwriter, but I just stay home all the time and I'm waiting for somebody to kind of discover me. That's usually a bad indicator. So people who are, active and doing, like the kind of stuff that Tomo's doing, where you're just like taking control of your own kind of future or whatever, like that's usually a really good indicator of what could be a good relationship for.
And just for the room, for them to understand, like how many records approximately would Sub Pop release in a year? Because I don't know if people necessarily know how many titles. And then I'll ask that question of you as well.
It varies from year to year, but we usually put out somewhere between 18 and 24 full-length records in a year. And then over time and over the course of probably the past like 6 or 8 years or something like that, the number of releases that we do has multiplied like crazy because you're doing like digital singles and kind of one-off things a whole lot more. And every record has like 2 to 5 pre-release singles. So our release schedule, even though the number of actual full-length records has stayed relatively the same, it's just crazy busy in comparison just because of what's been enabled by like DSPs and streaming and stuff like that.
And just one follow-up to that, just for the room, that of that 20, what did you say, 20?
Yeah, something, 22.
How many of those are artists that are already signed versus new signings? So approximately, like 25% new in a year or something like that?
Something like that, yeah. I mean, we have years that like, and it's something you can't really predict because people record music at their kind of own pace. But there are definitely years, like last year was a year we put out a lot more like kind of developing artists. And then we have years where stuff kind of stacks up, where you'll have like a Beach House record and a Father John Misty record and a Wise Blood record and Built to Spill and stuff like that. Like they'll all have records in the same year, and that'll be, so it varies, I guess is the answer.
Right, I guess I'm just trying to set this up, as oftentimes I think as emerging artists or artists, you think of like, well, if I could get on that label, but sometimes you don't realize how few slots there are for potential to be considered for release.
I mean, I think and that I'm sure goes for you too. Like it's both a slot in a release schedule and what you can accommodate in amidst the responsibilities that you have with the artists that you already work with, but it's also just a bandwidth thing because we definitely want to feel like we're doing all we can for all of the releases that we put out. So if you're just stretched too thin, then you're not going to be able to like do right by those kinds of developing artists because they require kind of a lot. I mean, there's a lot of work with every release. If you have a bigger release, there's certainly a lot of work to do to set that up, but every release should have its own kind of lane and capacity to support. So that's a balancing act, I guess.
Right. So Kay, how many tapes do you guys release average on a year?
I would probably say at this point probably about like 12 maybe. We haven't also been kind of diving into like digital only things, just for like not necessarily bands that aren't like ready, but just like if you just wanted to drop something but we've been wanting to work together, that could be like the start. And then we can, make physical things down the road on something that you're like really excited for. But yeah, I would say probably about 12. I like to do at least like one a month. If sometimes there's 2, that's okay. But again, it's all about like bandwidth and like I do want to give attention to the things that we're trying to make. And especially like working with like, just like emerging artists and stuff. It's a lot of like, there's a learning curve that's sort of like, oh yeah, like here, I would like to put out like a single first and then like do it, have an album announcement happen and like, I don't know, just trying to kind of coach that is also part of the like learning experience for everyone, I think. But
I think it's one of those things that at least in my experience, all musicians I talk to, you finish making a record and you just want the world to hear it. And you don't want to wait necessarily to do all the things that makes it more possible for more people to hear it.
The
right?
album cycle.
Indeed. And then with your label, so let's say an artist was here, they were thinking, well, we should try and get Den Tapes to put out our tape. We could put out a tape ourselves. But so obviously when you are part of a label, you're a curatorial layer where you're saying, if it's on my label, it's something that I think is good. But how does it, and you don't need to get into specifics of dollars or anything, but do you kind of just make them and split product with the band and they can sell some and you sell some, or do you sell it all, or how does that usually work?
How did you guess that immediately? How did you know that?
I've lived it firsthand, but it used to be 7-inch singles as opposed to cassettes.
God, yeah. Yeah, so the way our model works now is basically if we have like a run of 100, I split the run with the band, and the band pays in for their 50, and I pay in for my 50, and then we don't ever have to worry about money getting lost in the wash, or like, you know, me not giving you the money, or like, you know, you not giving me the money, whichever. And I think it just works a lot better to be like, now you're free to do whatever you want with this product. Like, this is how much you should sell it for. This is how much it costs to make. And now you just get to run free and make your money.
And remind me, they're not necessarily exclusive, right? They're limited edition, but if they wanted to re-release that music in another format or
Totally.
things
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah, then bands have done that before, and we have bands that have worked with other labels to do vinyl, and I always think that's fun. Like, just because we can't afford it doesn't mean you shouldn't also try to get another label to put it on a vinyl. Like Wild Powers is a good example of that, because they work with Nadine in Portland, also a local-ish label, also run by a woman. Let's go. Anyway, but yeah, so it's nice to be like, oh, we don't mind that we both love this band so much, and I just love tapes, so I'm gonna do that.
Cool. Tomo, I'm curious. You know, we talked about you doing a bunch of different stuff. You had something that I thought was super cool lately, that a song you recorded had a really prominent placement in House of Ninja that was a global hit on Netflix. Maybe tell somebody, you know, with your licensing stuff, I mean, you were asked or lucky enough to be part of some of Lynn Shelton's films and different things like that. How did those sort of opportunities come along, and how are you trying to cultivate them, or is it just sort of the lightning strikes every now and then and a phone call comes?
Yeah, well, the House of Ninjas project came about because the director and creator of the show, Dave Boyle, is an old friend of mine. He worked with another friend of ours named Go Nakamura, and they made a movie together called Surrogate Valentine that came out in, I don't know, 2010 or something, you know? And so we've been friends for like a decade. And Dave's fluent in Japanese, and he's very knowledgeable about Japanese culture. So you know, we've always kind of connected on that level. But it took that long to kind of find the right project to work together on, and yeah, every sort of like big opportunity that I've gotten in that world has been through like just personal connections, you know. Lynn Shelton I had met through MTV docu-series called $5 Cover that was around.
If you haven't seen that, please look it up on Venmo. It's one of my favorite things to watch.
Is that online? Oh,
yeah,
man.
or not Venmo, Vimeo. I don't even know what these are.
It's also available, I think, on Alaska Airlines.
Is it?
Oh, is
Yeah.
it? Speaking of which, I
Next flight.
just met somebody at Treefort, a musician from Colorado, and they said that when they were growing up, they saw that and they went out and bought like 32 records. Every record, they were like, I gotta find this
No
one, I gotta
way.
find that. And I
Oh,
was like,
man.
whoa.
Yeah, well, that's amazing because I don't think the series ever came out. It was just like the MTV paid for it, and then like it got shelved for one reason or another. But you know, like I met Lynn through that, and I wasn't even like in the cast. I played in a band called the Maldives at the time, and then and I met Lynn, and she was always out at shows. You know, she loved music and loved supporting people that she enjoyed, and then we just became friends. And then I think she like was inspired by a show that that she attended that I had played, and then she wanted to write that experience of going to that show like into her movie. So yeah, out of the blue, she kind of just sent me the script, and she's like, "Hey, do you want to be in a movie?" And I said, "Yeah." And then, you know, just figuring it was just like a small little local cast or something, and then they were like, "Oh yeah, it's got Elliot Page and Allison Janney and you know, the guy from Office Space." was like, what am I doing here? You know, but the most meaningful projects like that for me have always come through personal connection and just like, you know, they say it's who you know.
It's not what you know, it's who you know. Is
Yeah,
it that? Yeah.
which can be a very like cynical sort of way of like looking at the world. I think, but I think the flip side of that is that it is about who you know and who you support and who you believe in, you know, and just like if you find like-minded people that are doing things that inspire you and are kind of similar to what you're trying to do, then you just build your own community, you know, and then like the cool part about all these projects that have come out is that it has taken us 10, 20 years to get to this level where we're making things for Netflix or whatever, and if all of it feels earned, and we're all happy for each other because like we've all been on this journey, you know what I mean? And
There's definitely a not gross version of that saying that sounds like what you're doing, right? I mean, it's like you're just like
right,
having
yeah.
actual authentic relationships with people versus like networking.
And that takes time. You know, I think people kind of misunderstand that phrase to be this like transactional thing where you're just like, you want something I have, I would like to network with you, and you give me that thing, you know. But like, it has to be this like, and like an equal relationship, you know, that you build organically, and yeah, and I think it's super satisfying to see your friends succeed, you know, and then yeah, it's awesome. And then sometimes when the circumstances are right, they'll invite you along on you know, and then you can do the same for other people, and yeah.
As musicians, sometimes we tend to want to hang out with other musicians, and it really behooves you to find people that are trying to emerge as filmmakers or visual artists or graphic designers or any of that stuff, because you can all help raise up each other together, and you never know who's going to get their foot in the door.
Absolutely.
And create that opportunity. And it's more fun that way.
Yeah.
You don't have to hear that same story over and over again from that one musician you hang out with. So.
Yeah, and I think it's absolutely essential to like step outside of music too. Like, there's so much art going on in the city, like, you know, visually, like film and dance, and just the more people you meet, you realize that you're all kind of doing the same thing, you know, just like expressing your interior world in a creative form, and there's a lot of like common threads, and then the more you kind of learn about their creative process, the more you can kind of find a role within that, you know, if it's something that you want to be a part of, you know, and then.
It's almost like if you stay interested and curious, some of that stuff is a byproduct of just that interest, right? Like, that's not like the goal. You're just
right. Yeah. When you're just like really stoked about an idea, then that's the reward itself, you know. And then like, yeah, the whatever you end up with is just kind of a byproduct of that enthusiasm, I guess. Yeah.
One thing I'll say, in that you mentioned Lynn Shelton. How many people are familiar with the Northwest Film Forum here in Seattle? Okay, so a bunch of you. But, you know, I think Lynn kind of was spurred on by that program, and, you know, it would be great if you may not be able to get somebody to pay you to license your music, but you might be able to loan some to some emerging filmmaker, and if there's opportunities there, and it's something else to put on your resume or tell agents or labels or any of that other stuff. Have you folks had the opportunity to do any licensing of any of the Den Tape stuff?
I don't. The thing with Den Tapes is we don't own anything.
Right.
It's
Okay.
it's all artist owned. But actually, my friend Mikesh made a movie a couple of years back called Mountainside. If you haven't seen it, it's really, really good. I don't know. I love every movie that's ever been made in Seattle. I feel like it just makes me feel really good to watch movies. I'm like a huge Lynn Shelton fan. And yeah, I think that's how I found out about Tomo to begin with. Was just a super big fan of hers. But yeah, we got Antonioni, if anybody remembers that band. They're great. But they were in the movie, and I went to see it like alone in a theater, just like nobody else was there. And then I like saw like in the thank yous was like my name and Den Tapes, and I was just like, oh my god, and I just started crying. I was like, I've made it on the silver screen. But yeah, I mean, it's nice. I just want people to hear these bands. Like, that's why we don't really own anything. I'm just like, you do what you need to do. I will help you in any capacity. And they did ask us, and I just asked the band, and they were like, let's do it. So
Yeah, I mean, again, you just never know where this stuff's going to come from. So, Chris, I was asking before we started, so we maybe shift gears here just a little bit in that, you know, we're talking about labels and things like that that are kind of a hybrid of the old music business and the new music business and things like that. And so with artists that you folks are signing these days with Subpop, how much are you asking them, or how adept do you want them to be in content creation for social media and things like that? Or how does that work into your mix of what you're doing? And are artists monetizing that? Are they making money off of that content? Whether it's, this is a long question, I'm sorry, whether it's through TikTok or you know, royalties or payments from that or other sources?
Well, in my experience, there's very little money to be made from TikTok, specifically in the platform. So that's, at least for us, we see very little money from that particular thing. As far as how or what we want or expect from artists that we work with in terms of content creation, I mean, we hope for a lot, and we would like to try to help enable people who have, you know, an affinity for that kind of stuff, or like good ideas or whatever. But it's not a great fit for every artist that we work with, and it's not a necessity that they do that. Although participating in picking some kind of channel through which you can, you know, kind of market yourself, I guess, is important for all of the artists that we work with. And we try to do that on their behalf through Subpop's channels, and we're, you know, lucky enough to have like a pretty big followership for just like our different social channels, so we can make up for some of that. But it's really kind of, you know, like genre dependent. A lot of the times the people who follow, and this is a generalization, but a lot of the people who follow like Subpop's Instagram channel or whatever might be like big Tad fans and maybe less interested in some like newer developing artist or whatever. So anyway, to kind of maybe eventually answer your question, you know, we want to help people get good at that stuff, and we hope that they're adept at it, but it's not a requirement. And none of the artists, save for one that we work with, has monetized or is making any kind of money off their social media content. And I actually don't totally have a ton of insight. We work with one artist named Suki Waterhouse, who has an enormous social media following, and I think that she's, you know, making or doing some kind of product placement-y kind of influencer stuff. But I don't really have a lot of insight on that, and that's not a revenue stream that we participate in any way, so it's not really part of our thing, you know? Like, I don't have a lot of visibility into that, but I believe that she's doing very well for herself.
Awesome. Tomo, how much are you thinking about that? Like, if you have so many hours in a given day that you're going to play a show or work on writing songs or recording music or creating content, I mean, for social media, do you feel like, is it something you enjoy doing, like creating this stuff for socials, or is it like the necessary?
A little bit of both. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not Suki Waterhouse for sure.
Not yet.
Not yet. Yeah.
Just wait until Daisy, what was that show?
Daisy Jones and the Six is the show, Ben, and it's very good.
You're going to be the seventh, Tomo.
Yeah, I mean, I think I see a lot of people kind of struggle with the concept of like promoting themselves, and I used to, you know, have a hard time with that as well. But I think once I kind of started thinking of my own music as like what if it was my friend's music, you know, like that I'm talking about. Like, I'd be so stoked to like share it, you know. And so I think there's a way of kind of like working with social media. You can treat it as its own sort of like creative format, you know. You can have fun with it, you know. And I think the people that like have the most success in that kind of stuff are the ones that are at least seem like they're having fun. You know, it doesn't feel like you can kind of tell when something is a scheduled post, you know, or just like a by the numbers sort of promo thing. But like when people are just like being real, like being themselves, and just like sharing their own thoughts, and you know, just kind of yeah, like treating it like an art project in itself, you know. I think makes it a lot easier to navigate. But like I think at the end of the day, that is a separate animal from being a musician itself, you know. So like, and there are people who like make a good living at, you know, being a social media influencer or whatever, and I'm not totally opposed to that necessarily, you know. But like, but know that like, if you want to be a musician, like, focus on your music first and foremost, you know, and then just like, yeah, don't worry about all that other stuff, because it, you know, it doesn't really matter, you know, in the real world, you know. Like, I mean, you can get all the likes in the world, but like, if your music sucks, then people aren't gonna come see you a second time, you know.
Okay, I'm wondering, you know, because you're working with more emerging artists and things like that. I remember from my personal experience, it always meant a lot for the first time somebody else released my music rather than self-released. Do you feel like that's a vibe that you're getting from the artists that you work with, that there's a validation in having somebody else want to do that?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't want to speak for anyone. There's a few of you in the audience right now. How do you feel? Good about it? Okay.
Are you guys validated?
Okay. Yeah. Are you guys validated?
Exactly.
Feeling validated right now? Say yes, really loud for me. Just kidding. But yeah, I think people just like being part of the community, and that's like, you know, it's always back to community for me. And that's like what Den Tapes has become. I feel like more than just a label. It's just, I mean, I'm glad that everyone trusts what I'm putting out, and people want to continue to listen to the things that I put out, because I don't feel like my taste is half bad. But yeah, it's just nice that like people are like, oh yeah, I want to be part of that. That's like it's a nice feeling for me, so I'm gonna assume that it's a nice feeling for them. But I love that I get to do that, and then I love that people want to be part of it.
That's awesome. When you have maybe you have more artists coming to you than you can actually put out. I mean, do you try to counsel or advise artists about how they can put their own music out, or different things like that?
Yeah, definitely. Even if I like can't fit it in the schedule, or if we're like too booked up, anytime somebody wants to talk about how to put out a tape or like what a release schedule looks like, I'm down to get coffee, down to get a beer, down to do it.
Awesome. Well, we're coming up. We have about 10 minutes left. I'd love to open it up for some questions that you might have. I know we said this is about monetization. There's a lot of, we could probably go in depth on any one of these things really deep. But I'm hoping, the one thing I'm hoping out of all this is that all of the people in this room are all part of this community. These folks are all part of this community. I'm sure you can chat with them afterwards, any of that stuff. And that, as what Kay was just saying, it's in my experience, people have always been very generous with sharing information, even if they can't share opportunity. So, yeah, right here.
What do we provide to the artists that we work with? There's I hope, in the best circumstances, that's a whole lot of stuff between distribution in the physical and digital spaces, making sure that everything is optimized in the places that it should be, whether that's through YouTube or through any of the like streaming channels that are out there, making sure that you're, you know, setting up your album cycle in a way that works best for you. I hope that we're a resource in terms of like understanding the, you know, occupation that you've chosen to get into, in addition to it being primarily, I would hope, an art form. I mean, the range of stuff that we can provide, and I hope that we do provide, again, in the best of circumstances, is pretty broad. And that, if you were in a conversation with a record label, and I've never worked for any other record label, so I don't know a ton about how they operate, but I know that in our cases, when we're talking to artists about potentially working together, a big part of that preliminary conversation is just a broader understanding of all the stuff that we do provide for them. Whether that's on just like a strictly kind of business level, or like we have an art department who can help you like put together the art for your record or the packaging. We have like a licensing department who is doing a lot of pitching for syncs and stuff like that. So just that kind of understanding of all the services that we provide, in addition to like marketing with radio and social media and publicity and sales with independent record stores like where K-Works do. Ran out of breath.
I mean, in some ways,
that's enough.
You folks, because you release more than one record a year, you're building up relationships that you are always fresh, as opposed to somebody that maybe releases 1 or 2 records a year and they try to get their mailing list and send it out.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of fundamental stuff that I think it's really hard to do on your own as an artist, and I don't even know, like, something that's impactful for us is like playlist placement within streaming services, specifically with, editorial playlists that are put together like specifically by Spotify, as opposed to like a user-generated playlist. That will generate a lot of streaming activity, and like we have people who work for us who are doing pitching to those services to try to get on those playlists. It's not a guarantee, but like that's a thing that we're actively doing with editorial teams at streaming services. So that's part of it.
It's a partnership at the end of the day, isn't it? I think a lot of bands kind of have this idea that once they get signed to a Subpop or like to a big label, then they can stop working, or like the machine will.
That
just
is not
like,
true.
Yeah, like it's not about like what they can do for you, but like how you can work together as a team. I think to like sell the thing that you put out. Yeah.
Different artists are like have different affinities or like capabilities or interests or whatever. So like there are some artists who are very interested in like running their own business and doing all of the shit that is like making sure their metadata is properly distributed in the places that it should be. But there are a lot of artists who don't care about that stuff at all and would way rather focus on just being in a band, which I can relate with. And in a certain way, I think this probably comes off a little self-interested because I'm kind of making a case for why record labels are worthwhile, which they fucking are.
Hey, cut it out.
Anyway,
This isn't a shill fest. Come on. Tomo, we mentioned we should have gone on that. Obviously streaming, depending on who you're talking to, revenue's up, revenue's down, all those sorts of things for artists. But have you had the opportunity to get any primary, bigger playlist placements that have allowed you to see how that impacts your streaming revenue?
Nothing that I've like personally pitched for. Like, what is that? There's some like scammy service that like you pay them to like have people pitch.
Almost all of those are totally a scam.
Yeah, it's yeah.
Yeah, you can do it yourself, depending on who you use for your DSPs. But we use DistroKid, and if you're submitting an album, you can pitch for something. No, it might not work, but
Sure, yeah,
Well.
yeah. I did mine through TuneCore, but like my last album, the first single, "Get to Know You," kind of like I pitched it, and it ended up on some playlists and just like shot up, But like I don't know how that happens. It just when it hits that like sweet spot, it just kind of finds its own audience. But like, it's not there's no formula to it. I don't think,
I feel like it wouldn't be as fun if it did have a formula, Just taking chances left and right here, but that's kind of the fun of it.
Well, it seems, and I could be wrong, but it seems that it's still people making those decisions. It's not an algorithm making those decisions on the playlisting, or the big playlist at least.
The thing Tomo was saying about relationships mattering in every aspect of your artistic career is totally true, and it's totally true for us too, right? We have relationships that you've built up with people who work at Spotify or Apple Music or whatever over time because they're fans of music, and you talk to them about the stuff that matters to them. Sure. And then the playlist stuff can sometimes be sort of incidental as a result of those relationships.
Well, and I think a lot of times, at least in my experience, people that have those roles at Spotify or a different place like that, they're people that were probably K 10 years ago, people that worked in record stores, people that worked in college radio, all these things, and they just like live and breathe music. And they might not be musicians themselves, but in a weird way, like they'd be more excited knowing about something that was on Den Tapes because they know that, and they're like, oh, I should give that some sunlight on this playlist I'm working. Wouldn't that be cool? As opposed to them thinking like, oh, well, that'll get more spins if we put that in the playlist because that person was at a party with Post Malone last week or something like that.
I wish I was at a party with Post Malone.
Are you putting out the new Post Malone on Den
I
Tapes?
wish. I mean, Texas boy, so.
Oh, that's
yeah.
right. That's right.
The connection.
Right here. Another question.
I guess, yeah. Soft skill, it's going to sound really bad, but I think just like people skills is good. Like the willingness to like put yourself out there is like such a big one for me personally. And I know that's hard, and I get it, but I think it helps so much if you can, get out to shows and put yourself out there and want to talk to other people in your community and get to know people, and that's literally how everything gets done. So, yeah, that's mine.
I think, just being like a decent human being who people are going to want to be around. And I think everybody has had instances where they've met people in their lives who are like especially magnetic for whatever reason. They're just personalities who are like attractive in some fashion. And I think that when people have that, when you interact with them and you're just like kind of charmed by them, you know that that's going to kind of work in some way. People are going to respond to that. I think that's huge. And then I think, kind of just building on what you were saying, is like an authentic engagement in music and art and the excitement and fun of that, and like being involved, like whether that means that they're also participating in art shows or like there's just like a level of just like putting yourself out there and being kind of enmeshed in a like kind of cultural scene that I think is a great skill to have, or it's an exciting thing to be around too.
Yeah, without sounding like the old man yelling at clouds on the front lawn, I mean, I think you really do have to give to get. Like, if you want people to come to your show, are you out seeing other people's shows? Are you doing things like that? And so much of the artists that I've seen that get up, it's because they're out supporting, and then you're talking to people in an organic way, and that person's like, oh, I saw your show. You guys should open our next show. Just like all that kind of stuff like Tomo's talking about that's not, there's no secret theory. It's just people that like what each other does. There was one more back here? Yeah, right here, yeah.
I don't think I'm qualified to answer that because we don't really pay for a lot of things. We're very small. We pay to make tapes. Good investment. Bad investment, I don't know. I probably had like bad lunch with someone once, but sorry. I can't go very in depth with that one.
It seems like there's been a lot less emphasis on like music videos. I don't know if you've felt this. Like people used to spend a ton of money on like making super high budget videos, but like I don't think people really have the attention span to watch a whole video, you know what I mean? So like kind of spreading that around.
Well, that's a bad news.
Well, yeah,
For
right.
people making music videos.
I don't know.
Tomo.
It's just,
I don't wanna hear that.
It's just reality. Yeah, but I mean, less so on like the image stuff, I think, and just kind of like capturing more of the, for me at least, like getting like high quality footage of like shows and stuff has been more effective than like putting all your eggs into one basket. Yeah.
I think just in this world, maybe somebody knows, but you just never know what's going to get traction and is sticky on socials. And it could be highly produced content. It could be the most organic content. It could be some weird, I saw videos from Taylor Swift's tour that were like people in the third balcony, and because somebody was freaking out up there, that got a gazillion hits. And granted, it's Taylor Swift, but you just never know. It's just whatever makes people feel something. So
I mean, you could waste a whole lot of money on like TikTok influencer campaigns. That's a really good way to really waste a shitload of money if you wanted to. In my opinion, I've never seen it actually work where it's been manipulated and worked.
unless your art is doing sting operations on TikTok influencers.
Which it's not. But and then I think, like the stuff that's worthwhile is like, it's, is never all that like glamorous or whatever. It's the stuff where it's like, like our approach is always like kind of like broadcast everything as wide as possible, and then like play to, or like kind of push where there's like enthusiastic response. So if there's something that's happening at KEXP or whatever, like spending money to bring a band into town so they can do a live in studio session, that's a smart thing to do, right? Because you're like taking the support that they already have and trying to build on that. So like there's nothing that's like, you know, if we spend X amount of money, it's going to equal this. You know, like, it's just like doing the things that make sense and kind of like getting, you know, taking risks where it's a smarter bet. You know, like, and they're usually pretty small stakes bets for us.
Awesome. Well, folks, I'm afraid that's the end of our first panel. Put your hands together for our wonderful panelists tonight. That was great, you guys. Thank you so much.